morning, everyone. Today is July 5th. It's been a beautiful day. It was 101 degrees here in St. Louis. I worked from home, so I wasn't outside the majority of the day. So I decided to take a walk over to the river. I like to be where water is, particularly running water. And so this river, the Mississippi River, it runs from north to south, and it runs practically the length of the United States of America. So as I sit here, I see a couple things that's interesting to me that I want to share with you about running a race. I'm gonna get to that. You see this river. You see there's a steady current that's moving down, going south to the right, but the wind is blowing to the north. Uh, you see the flags there blowing to my left, which is north, and the river is running to my right, which is south. You can barely see that the river is flowing south because there's nothing on the river that's actually moving. You notice that there are a couple barges, and these barges have been secured to this bank on both sides. And the reason why they're secured, because if they're not secured, no matter how heavy those barges are, as long as they can float and displace water, that barge is going to be taken downriver. Well, your life is the same way. If you don't anchor yourself to old thoughts, old beliefs, it'll take you new places. But many of us are anchored to old thoughts, old beliefs, people, places, and things, which results in us being stuck. And it may feel as though we're moving because we can have the illusion that we're going downstream when we're stuck. And then there comes frustration. So I'm just encouraging somebody tonight that if you're stuck, if you're feeling like life is passing you by, it probably is. Why? Because you're anchored. Something I heard a long time ago, and it goes like this: your destiny is always tied to a destination. And oftentimes, the destination is not your place of origination or the city you were born in, the state you were born in. But too many of us are anchored to the place of our origin. One, because of familiarity. Two, because of loved ones, people, friends, customs. But there comes a point where if you really want to move to the next level in your life, you got to be willing to pull up the anchor and let your ship go down here. Well, I want to share something with you tonight. So as I walked over to the river, you can see here, I'm sitting underneath the arch. I'm looking east, and the arch is above me, and through the arch is represents going west. As I was walking over here, I had a recall. I recalled a story that was told to me when I was a kid. I want to kind of tell this story because right now a lot of people are feeling stuck, feeling as though they are not winning. In actuality, you are winning. You're right where you need to be, supposed to be. You're at the place that you're designed to be. Now, if you want to change where you are, you got to do some things very different than what you've been doing. But I want to talk about the story of the tortoise and the hare. I know it's one of the Aesop's fables, and many of you are familiar with the story of the tortoise and the hare. There was this tortoise that was well known amongst the forest because he had actually raced every animal that could be raced. The fox, he had raced the fox, he had raced the pig, he had raced quite a few animals. And each time he would win, he would gloat. And so after winning his last race against the fox, After catching his breath, he kind of like said, "Who's next? Who's gonna race me?" And so everybody was just looking at one another, shaking their heads, and the turtle, or the tortoise, raised his hand. And everybody looked at themselves and others around the circle, and they said, "The tortoise?" And so he said, "Yes, I'll race you." And so the hare picked up a rock and he said, "I'm going to toss the rock in the air, and when it hits the ground, we're going to get down with the get." The rock came tumbling down and hit the ground, and they took off. Well, I'm sorry, the hare took off like a bat out of hell. And he was running, and the tortoise just began to pick up his pace. You wouldn't even think it was a pace because it was rather slow. But he was in the race. He was in the race at his pace, and the tortoise continued to pick him up and lay him down. But he couldn't see the hare, and the hare looked back, and the hare couldn't see the tortoise, and that the hare had grown tired. And he said, "You know what? I don't see the tortoise anywhere near. I'm going to just lay right here and take a nap." Not realizing that he was exhausted from being in this steady race that he was on against everybody, and he was winning. And so he lay down and he took a nap. Little did he know that time was slipping by, and the tortoise ultimately caught up with him, and he was moving at such a steady pace. The hare had no clue that the tortoise had passed him. And as he neared the end of the race, his friends and all the animals of the forest could see him, and they were amazed that he was out front. They began to cheer, and the tortoise couldn't pick up any faster pace. He kept picking them up, laying them down. Through all the ruckus and all the noise, the hare was startled, and he woke and he looked around and he couldn't see, but he heard all the noise, and he got up and he began to run. And when he turned the bend, he saw that the tortoise was just about at the end of the race. With all he had, the hare picked up steam, but he wasn't able to win this race. The tortoise, the turtle, crossed the finish line, and there was a big cheer from all who was around. They cheered him on because they celebrated his win, but in his win, they celebrated their losses, that somebody had finally beat the hare. That was one of my favorite stories as a kid, and there's a couple messages in that story. One of the messages has to be the race isn't given to the swift or the quick, but it's given to those who endure. And there's a couple other messages that I have picked up over the course of my life. I share them with clients. Sometimes people who are winners become obsolete. They become obsolete because they've won so much. They become complacent. And they think they're so far ahead in the game, and they tend to take breaks. They begin to enjoy life and not put the work in that they had been accustomed to putting the work in. And before you know it, life begins to pass them by because they are so self-absorbed and not realizing that those who are not in competition, because none of us has competition. And when you looked up, and many people who are winning today, as they look up, they realize that they are obsolete, that they're no longer out in front. They no longer have the best technology, the best information, cutting edge information, but somebody else has it. But that turtle teaches us something, that each of us must be authentic, and we're called to run the race that we're in, or properly said, the heat. Too many times we find out stronger. They're probably out in front of us. Many individuals who are like on the YouTube channels today. Quite a few people are starting off and they maybe only have 50 likes, or They don't have nowhere near the numbers that's necessary for them to become a personality. Some people get discouraged, but some take on some behaviors that are questionable, or integrity issues begin to show up. There's things that you can do to get people to come onto your feed and stay on your feed. And the ultimate goal is you just want people to like, but you don't have any true content. No, you're not called to run the race. You're not called to do what you're doing in competition to somebody else. You are unique. You're authentic. You have a word for somebody who has an ear to hear. You have a vibratory frequency that's being sent out that somebody can pick up. You have to be careful that you don't lose yourself or lose your way in this game of life. You got to know your design. You got to know your purpose. But knowing your design tells you how fast you can go. Your design tells you whether or not you are a procrastinator, or whether you can get it done at the last minute, or you need to maximize every minute. So my word to you all tonight is, man, know thyself, and to yourself be true. Woman, male, female, divine beings that you are. Know your unique design. Know what you were created to do. Know that the heat that you've been running in may not be the heat that you were designed to be in. Know that it may not even be your time to shine, but yet it's your time to put the work in, to run your laps, to pick up the pace, a steady pace toward the end. And as you run in your race, and it appears as though everybody is out in front of you, that you're obsolete, and because you're behind, you're not behind. Because in reality, you're not running against anyone. Your biggest competitor is yourself. So stop measuring yourself against others. Stop defining yourself in terms of what the group is doing. Stop defining yourself based on what you used to do, and define yourself based on right here, right now. If you know you're supposed to be great and you're not doing great things, then you have to make a decision. Either you live in the illusionary world, or you come into the realness of, what must I do today to maximize this day? So as I sit here, I want to encourage you all that we are in some strange times. We're in strange times because the entire employment world is changing. Those who have had pensions, that's a, a dying crew. And then you have those who are now in this thing, and they're earning all of this money, entrepreneurship, but they're not doing the things they need to do. To those, I say, consider the ant. The ant is always working and putting aside, because the ant knows the season change. And the season is shifting for many people. You got to be willing to let go of what's no longer serving you. That's been a big challenge for me. I'm born at a very unique time in this world. I'm a 60s child, so actually I was born in January 60. That puts me right at 62. And so I'm born, I saw the civil rights movement, I observed it. I was too young to participate in it, but old enough to have it impact my life. And that's kind of what gives me the drive for our people, the passion for people of African descent, melanated people. I could have done a lot of things in my life. I was in the military, could have went on, had an illustrious career as a naval officer. I could have stayed with the church and pastored, because as a young man, I had one of the largest physical churches in the neighborhood that had the capacity. Check on this brother behind me. I can see him. He's not going to get the drop on me. So you always got to be aware of your surroundings. Sometimes people think you're sleeping, but you just got your eyes closed. My mother used to say, every eye that closed ain't sleep. So I was just saying that so when I look back over my life, I've always been in position that if I would have followed that path, I probably could have been successful. But I always, right at the pinnacle, there would be a shift in my life. The last shift I had was almost 15 years ago, back with the church. Had a thriving church, it's growing, beautiful building, paid for, had all those things, and then it shifted. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I knew Source, Spirit, Holy Spirit, for those of you who use that language, told me it was time to pull up anchor and be ready to do what's next. And so I just ultimately let the church close, and everybody's looking and everybody's saying he must have done something wrong. And that's one of the things you got to learn. If you're going to be a winner, you got to be able to press on even when the crowd isn't cheering for you. Maybe you need to buy your own um, cheering box or applause box. Applaud yourself. But you got to understand that when you have a burning desire and a drive, a call to do something, most oftentimes those around you don't see it. Many won't even think you have the propensity to be it. But you got to reach down within yourself and know that you are the God. What the word tells you, be still. And sometimes we have a difficult time, those of us who are about making things happen. Sometimes we got to get to the place where you just allow things to happen. The scripture tells us to be still and know that I am God. Now, when we hear that, most oftentimes it's interpreted as you just be still and come into the realness or the reality that God is in control. But I don't define it like that. I teach expanded form of Christianity, not even new thought. I call it now thought. So I teach that in this way: be still and know that you are God. Yes, there's no God out there. You are God. And when you come into the realization that you are God and begin to live God like, then you take on the character of God. When you understand that very God that you have studied for so many years, that's external to you, if you can pull out the principles that you assign to this God out there and begin to operate with those same principles as if you are the God, then you'll begin to see your world change quickly. So once you're still and you know, to know something means to be intimate with it. When we look in the scriptures and it says Adam knew Eve, that means there was a level of interaction that was intimate that produced something. So many times when we say we know something, if we're not able to apply it, we don't know it. We're familiar with it. We are aware of it. We're conscious of it. But we got to get to the place where we are intimate with the things we know. So be still and know that you are God. And when you know the character and the characteristics of a divine being, you operate as such. And so that means that you can begin to create, co create with the universe, with source, with divine intelligence effortlessly. Too many of us are laboring to make things happen, thinking that we got to buy this, we got to do this. But if you are intentional and deliberate and you're clear on it, what it is you are seeking to create or do, be, or have, and you can imagine that thing as if it's already done and live from the end, you'll begin to create it effortlessly. When you can really see that it's already happen, things begin to happen miraculously. But for too many of you, the first thing you do is you identify how much it's going to cost. So you get into that paradigm of It takes money. It don't take money. It takes an idea. And every idea that is being played out sends out a vibratory frequency that will attract what it is you need to get it done. Now, if you believe it's going to take money, then you got to go and make money. But if you just say that if you're clear on what it is you want to do, be, or have, and don't put any conditions on it, it comes to you. I'll give you an example. When I was called in the ministry back in the 80s, okay, I was called in ministry in the 80s. In 81, I was 21, and in 90, I was called into, or elevated, put it like that, into the pastorate. And I heard it clear. I knew clearly that I was supposed to pastor a church. But I said to Source that I would do it under these conditions, that I'll never have a storefront and that I'll never have to beg. Because if I just had in my mind's eye, if I'm serving, quote, God, I should not have to be in environments that don't represent God. So we started the ministry and we met at the hotels. This is in the early 90s. We met in the hotels. And then one morning, as I was driving to work, taking the same route that I always take, that I always would take, I stopped at the stoplight and to my left was this huge church. And Spirit told me, go, when you get off work, go there and inquire about using the facility. Long story short, I went there after work. Just so happens the pastor of the church was there, was a white pastor, and he said, I'll take it to the board, but I don't know if that's going to happen because we just had some renters. There was another black group that had rented the church. It was an all-white church, and I don't know what had transpired, but they had decided to no longer allow them to use the space. Well, a week later, they had held their meeting, and I could use the space. Long story short, I didn't have to pay for that. As years went on, I became the pastor of the all-white church. And then ultimately, when they who had built the church, they left, and they left all of it to me. So what am I saying in this story? This is what I'm saying. When you focus on more on what you're supposed to be creating versus how and when it's to be created, it'll take care of itself. But when you start looking at what do I need from that perspective, I mean, getting into the details of it, that damages the vision. Now that pulls you into a world paradigm. Scripture says we're in this world, but we're not. Whatever you believe that you're called to do, nobody's going to do it for you, but God will do it, or Source will do it with you, through you, as you. So that's my word for you tonight. The sun that kind of went down, and I'm sitting here under the arch, just being still and knowing. As I walk the streets of St. Louis, I hear wherever the soles of my feet should tread, I'm taking ownership. So as I walk through St. Louis, and there's some things that's wanting for in this downtown area, I imagine you may see a dilapidated building. I make it my business to see it a fully functional building. To the point where just recently, I purchased a property a year ago today downtown. And about a month ago, I was informed that there is a 700,000 square building, one of the tallest buildings in the area. Used to be an AT&T building, and it's been dormant for some years. That someone recently purchased it, and I believe it's a direct result of me walking around it and past it, and not seeing it as empty, but seeing it as a vibrant, functional building. Now, guess what that has done? That has increased my property value without me having to do not one thing. So I'm changing my environment I'm changing my external environment, my environment, my external environment through the use of my internal environment. We heard it said, as above, so below. How about this? As on the inside, so the outside. Whatever's going on in your life on the outside, I guarantee you it's a direct result of what has gone on the inside. So be still, get quiet, and know who you are as a divine being. You are a divine spiritual being having a human experience. But your goal is not just to have a human experience, but it's to master this thing called life. Well, that's all I got. I'm Asar, also known as Greg. Hope something has been said that's been uplifting and encouraging. If it has value and you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you go up into the channel, you'll find that there's more information about Oasis Spiritual Center for Divine Living, what the ministry is all about. Open that link up, go to the website, poke around, and be blessed. Peace. I'm out. Have a wonderful evening. Run the race, but at your pace. Peace.